So this is before you can get into world tiers 3, 4, and 3 and 4.
Wait, was he going to say 5? Ladies, gentlemen, and Haradrim of all ages, we had the Campfire Chat stream last night telling us a lot about what to expect for patch 1.1.1 coming up on August 8th. We get the full patch notes themselves on August 2nd, this upcoming Wednesday, so we can look at them all in detail. But in the meantime, there is still a surprising amount going on with Diablo 4 as a game and in the community itself for the game. First, we do have some stuff to talk about in relation to World Tier 5 as a concept. Then we also have some tweets from the developers themselves, things they've either hinted at or straight up confirmed, as well as a full-on warning of potential bans that could be coming if you do something specific with your game. We also have a really strange interaction, which is clearly a bug, but it could have a majorly negative impact on your experience making builds in the game, and then at the end we'll go over what seems to be the general sentiment of the community in regards to the Campfire Chat stream last night, and the information that we have on the upcoming patch in general. So to start off then, World Tier 5? Well, a while back we found out that there was some data mined info revealing a whole 3 tiers of gems that we don't currently have access to, then there were also some images data mined related to the concept of World Tier 5, literally in the game files themselves as we currently have them, along with mention of a capstone dungeon that we cannot currently see. The big thing that is making this info come back up right at this moment though, is this Reddit post that caught something very important. On the last page of the season journey in the last chapter, one of the objectives is defeat the Echo of Lilith. Most people saw this and just assumed it was, Uber Lilith, the big mega level 100 challenge boss, but this eagle-eyed player noticed something was off. The area that you fight Uber Lilith boss in is not called the Archives of Visalia, whereas the journey chapter objective is to defeat Echo of Lilith in the Archives of Visalia. And so this seems to have actually been some sort of mistake left in by the devs, somewhat of a placeholder, and more digging into it finds that the closed beta period before the game came out actually had a dungeon called Archives of Visalia that existed. Take note of this screenshot that says the dungeon is a level 90 zone, as well as the enemies in it also appear to be level 90. The enemies inside of it are that level, and the player that is playing is level 62. The vast majority of content in this game scales with your character, and interestingly, one of the few exceptions to that is capstone dungeons. A capstone dungeon with level 90 enemies would actually make a lot of sense to unlock a World Tier 5 in theory, as World Tier 3 is unlocked at a level 50 dungeon, World Tier 4 is unlocked in a level 70 dungeon, so this combined with the mention of that name of the dungeon sort of indicates that there was at least at one point a World Tier 5 in consideration in the actual testing of the game, or perhaps even that there still is a World Tier 5 coming in the future, and that they just did testing for this concept before the game itself released. The area with the dungeon entrance has even been fully blocked off of the map for now. It doesn't exist as far as the actual map is concerned, and while you can see entrances to it, you can't actually enter it, and it makes me wonder if this is something they chose not to do while they were making the later stages of the game, or if instead it was just something that they were planning for the future and wanted to check out early. In any case, I feel like World Tier 5 is pretty much inevitable as a concept, likely in the first expansion, but this is just even more information popping up that leads to the idea that they had people testing the concept of World Tier 5 in closed betas, assets in-game, and everything, and perhaps that means World Tier 5 isn't as far from existing as we might otherwise think. Next up we have some developer tweets, first one asking about the imperfectly balanced passive on Necromancer. This passive has been bugged since patch 1.1, making it unable to just have more than 1 point in it, despite it being a 3-point maximum passive. Adam Fletcher responds confirming that this will be fixed in patch 1.1.1. Then another question about something bugged in the previous patch. The aspect of Berserk ripping for Barbarians has essentially just fully stopped functioning since 1.1, and Rod Ferguson here replies saying again, this will happen in 1.1.1. So it looks like there is a fair bit of planned important bug fixing going on in this next major patch, and while it may not be labeled as actual balance changes, this will actually improve the balancing for certain classes once it's fixed, and that just adds on to everything else that we are aware of going on in that patch. After that, we should talk about this post by Adam Fletcher on the Diablo 4 forums. In this, he extensively warns people about using external add-ons for Diablo 4. We talked about this in a previous news video much closer to launch, quite a while ago now. People were reporting being banned for various reasons, and one of the big ones was using external add-ons. There weren't many of these being used, there weren't many around back then, but we had a warning for everyone in that video not to use any of these then, and it seems necessary to bring it back up again now. Yes, external add-ons can be extremely helpful, but using them runs the risk of getting you banned from the game and removing your access from just all of your characters and basically just removing all the time that you spent on the game so far, and you need to be aware of that risk. An example of what I mean is mentioned by Adam here, a mod called Turbo HUD 4. At first this just seems like a nice concept, things that aren't harmful, right? Showing a symbol symbol of the vendors to show you what they do from afar, symbols on players to show you their class, a little number on your resource bar to give you an actual numerical value to work with so you know what you have. Just nice things like that, right? What if I told you the same overlay can also reveal Unseen Fog of War in a dungeon? Well, I mean, that's convenient, but it's at least a little bit questionable, right? I mean, that is info that the game specifically doesn't want you to know for a reason. Then what if I told you this app can literally pinpoint elites that exist in the open world on your map just by reading your game's data? Yeah, you see the issue here now? Some of these things are just nice quality of life changes, but some of them could very easily be construed as cheating. That said, I'm not here to make a moral stance on whether this mod is a nice thing or a bad thing, whether you should or shouldn't use it as far as the morality of it all, just to say that I know stuff like this is out there and it can look appealing to use, but be very aware that it can get you banned if you use it, and so you should probably avoid it either way. With that then, let's talk about the very interesting and extremely costly bug that I've seen come up in the community quite recently. You know, enchanting, right? The act of bringing an item to the occultist and re-rolling one of your affixes in search of a better one? Well, as it turns out, there is a bug in the game that can make this far more expensive than it otherwise would be, and it, funnily enough, is tied to something that is supposed to be a benefit to the player. Specifically, this is an interaction with one of the season blessings, the one that makes vendors buy your items for a higher price. Interestingly enough, this bug only seems to happen with specifically legendary items as well, so that is one caveat to it, but it seems what is going on here is when you apply this season blessing, it simply increases the value of items across the board. This would make them sell for more when you bring them to a vendor, of course, but it would also make them cost more to repair after you die, and it would cause this interaction as well with the occultist that makes them cost more to enchant as well. All in all, this is a bug. It's a sort of funny bug for sure, and it's a very, oh, of course that's a thing, type of interaction to find, but this is mostly just a PSA to say, hey, if you are going to be re-rolling an item for like 1,000,000 gold because you've re-rolled it a bunch of times, spend the 100,000 or so gold to undo your vendor blessings if you have them, because that will just reduce the costs of enchanting. You will save yourself gold overall. Until this is fixed, that's the only way to treat it, as sad as it is, but now you know that it's a thing, you know why it's a thing, and you know how to avoid it being too much of a problem for the meantime. Finally then, let's talk about the general player response to the Campfire Chat and the promises that we've been given about the upcoming patch, as well as just how people are feeling in general about the game right now. First up, we should talk about the class buffs that are coming. Sorcerer got a ton of buffs coming in the patch, and generally speaking, they look pretty massive. They create a number of possible more viable builds for the class, fix up a bunch of stuff that worked a bit weirdly before, change the way that some things work at their core to make them actually function better, and just generally look to be doing a lot to fix a lot of the issues that people had with the current state of Sorcerer, being that it was the most popular class in the base game, and it has a long history of being a popular class in the entire Diablo series. And if this fixes what we all think it'll fix, then that is great. They also said there would be a lot of Barbarian changes, and there were a good number of changes, like literal number of them, but they seem a far cry from what happened to the Sorcerer. The general Barbarian response that I've seen is that they're alright, but they won't fix the inherent issues that the class has, most of which are tied to the necessity of the shouts to actually function at a high level. As for the other classes, there were some nice general changes, nothing completely meta shifting, but just good updates to help lay a better baseline in certain places. Aside from that, the most major change that we have coming is the change to dungeon density, and this Reddit post seems to sum up the sentiment that people have quite well. Honestly, a lot of the feelings apply to the game as a whole, really too, and how it's doing. Mob density is good, increasing that is great, it's the right direction to move forward, but it is just not enough. There are a lot of fundamental issues with the game that are keeping it from being great. The game at its core is still super enjoyable, but there are just a lot of problems. And while they are making efforts to fix these problems, they are somewhat like putting a band-aid on an open wound instead of stitching it up. There's a lot to be done. The dev team has said that it requires a lot of time for them to do, and we can all understand that and accept it, but it's disappointing given that the game has as much potential as it does. Even in its current state, you can see just all the lovely base layers that play within it. Again, the core gameplay is so nice, but there are just such greater issues with the game. Damage buckets and stats in general seem to be a problem that they're fully aware of and looking into. Some of the classes just have unfunctional potential build concepts because they weren't created in a viable way. A lot of systems like inventory space and the stash are just a really big issues, and things like creating and switching builds has been made weirdly challenging in a game that claims one of its main focuses is having a variety of powerful and enjoyable playstyles for every class. What's the point of having those if you can't experience multiple playstyles with your class? The long and short of it is that the game is fun, but it has a lot of issues that need to be fixed before we can call it an objectively great game. The issues are being looked at by the developers, but a lot of this is just little things that feel like they should never have existed or should have been fixed properly before launch. Things that make people wonder if the devs were really playing the game properly before they launched it, if they really knew what it was like to exist in the end game of what they created. So the general community sentiment seems to be the game is good at its core. The changes they are promising are solid, and they are good changes to make too, but they are just a small part of a much larger issue, and the biggest problem is simply the timeline of fixing all of this. The vast majority of people who were ever going to play Diablo 4 did so at the game's launch, and the player base will simply decline over time. That's just how it works. So the fact that all of these people experienced a version of the game that is simply lesser than what we will have in a few months, what we'll have in a year, is just a massive shame for all those people. The game, honestly, it needed more development time than what it had, and past that it needed far more testing of endgame mechanics and such to actually get an informed opinion on what needed to be changed before we all got our hands on it ourselves. A lot of these changes that we've had and are told are coming in the future are just reactionary responses to things that the community has noticed, things that simply should have been caught before the game released, like resistances being broken in endgame as a major thing. That is just such a major problem that is crazy to me no one noticed until it was too late. All of this to say, a lot of us still really enjoy playing the game. We like what it is, but with the promise of what the game can be and what it likely will be in a year's time, it's just sort of sad that it released how it did, and that it will take as long as it will to fix it up and make it all shiny and lovely. Simple as that. And that's it for today, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this breakdown of today's news in Diablo 4, some useful information, some interesting stuff to keep an eye on, and just a wrap up of the current sentiment a lot of people seem to be feeling about the direction of the game currently. I'm sure in a couple of days' time there will be even more to talk about. That's just how it works, and when there is, I'll be here to share it with you all. Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.